Welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, the greatest live broadcast in all of YouTube. I'm glad to have you with us tonight, where Ashley is going to be creating the drawing for us using Scratchboard. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But I'd like to welcome everybody from wherever you are around the world. I already see comments from Texas, Mexico, Michigan, Connecticut, North Wales, Norway. Guys, we're glad to see you guys. Well, not really see you, but see your names in the chat box anyway. So we're glad to have you tonight. Like I said, Ashley's going to be doing the drawing for us tonight. And I say drawing because I can't really think of a better way to describe it. And he's sitting right over there. You ready to go tonight, Ashley?
Yeah, I'm excited to draw for you guys tonight. I loved watching Matt create and finish his water apple or wapple or whatever you want to call it from last week. That was highly creative. Tonight will be a little bit less creative, I believe, but the tools that we're going to look at are somewhat creative. So I'm glad to share Scratchboard with you.
And Ashley used the word creative quite a number of times in that sentence, and that's because this season is all about being creative. This is actually the 10th season of Gettin Sketchy, and this is the 8th episode. We usually do 10 drawing episodes and then one review episode. So Ashley has 2 more drawings to do, and tonight he's going to be doing the Scratchboard etching, as he kind of explained. Then next week I will be doing another image, and then Ashley will have one more after that. And you guys have voted for what, or at least the prompt that you would like to see next week. And I'll reveal that at the end of the broadcast tonight. So you have to stay to the end to see what my prompt is going to be next week and what that prompt actually means. And this time, the one prompt, I think the voting's still open, but I feel pretty confident that the prompt that is going to win is winning by a landslide. So anyway, there is a photo reference that Ashley's going to be using tonight, and you can find that photo reference if you go to the YouTube channel. Probably most of you are watching this on the YouTube channel, but if you're not, all you have to do is click on the little icon of my face down in the bottom left-hand corner, and that will take you to the YouTube channel. You'll see a tab there that's labeled the Community tab, and if you click on that, you'll see the photo reference that Ashley's going to be working from tonight. You can use that to follow alongside if you wish, or you can just kick back and watch because Ashley's going to have the photo reference up for you, of course.
Yeah, and you can see it pretty well on the screen. There's not a whole lot of tiny details, so you may not need to bring it up on a second device.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have Scratchboard tonight, you could just use a white drawing media, like, for example, a white colored pencil or white charcoal.
Sure.
What we're doing is a little bit different from that, but you can still produce an image that's similar. And if you're brand new to the channel here, or if you haven't done so yet, I would encourage you, of course, to subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell so you're notified when we go live like this, and also when I upload static videos. And if you want to go deeper with your drawing and painting, of course, there's a membership program over at thevirtualinstructor.com, which includes a variety of drawing and painting courses on a variety of subject matter and media. Just about every drawing or painting media you can imagine, we cover there in a course. There's also weekly live lessons. So each week after these Gettin Sketchy broadcasts, we head over to thevirtualinstructor.com and do an hour-long lesson just for members. And these are presented in series. So these are longer drawings and paintings that we create, not like we do here on Gettin Sketchy, which are quick. And all of those live lessons are stored in our vault, and they go all the way back to 2012 when I first started streaming on the internet. There's also weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute, and there's also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers, which includes all of the resources you would need to teach for an entire year. So if you want to check that out, there is a link in the description below. Of course, you can check that out for free for 7 days. Again, if you want to learn more about the membership program, there's a link in the description below this video. You can check it out. Or if you want to just check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, there's also a link for that below as well. And that will put you on our newsletter list so you receive an email when new videos and lessons are posted on the website. Ashley, you ready to go?
Yeah, I think so.
Ready to go?
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about, a lot to look at before we get started. So let's go ahead and switch over.
All right.
All right, So you can see the reference there on the left and a piece of Scratchboard here on the right. It's pretty small. It's a small medium. It's a very fine medium. We're going to be using really tiny marks if you're following along on Scratchboard, or if you're using a gel pen, it might be similar, like a white gel pen on a black piece of paper, but pretty small nonetheless. So the size is 3 inches wide by 4 inches tall, and I've actually overlapped about 1/4 of an inch or 3/16 of an inch around all the edges. So this black tape is gaff tape. It's super strong. Hopefully I can get it off of here. I might have to cut my picture out, but hopefully you can still see with the black on black, you can still see the borders or the parameters of our support. So I went ahead and brought a couple of examples just so you can kind of get a feel for Scratchboard and its look. And I use a lot of hatching or cross hatching, but you can make any types of marks on Scratchboard with a variety of tools. So this is a little example I did a number of years ago in the classroom as a practice. It's got some stray marks on there over the years, just kind of carrying it and moving it around. You can see how tiny and fine those little marks are compared to the size of a pencil. And it does offer a wide variety of, a wide range of value, being that it starts out black, and it is possible to scratch all the way down to white, but it takes quite a bit of work to make an area this light. There's a lot of marks in there to get that light here on the left side of the iris. So this is an exercise that we've done in the classroom, but most of my students start out with forms. We always like to practice on simple forms, and so this is a second example that I've used, and all these extra marks around the edges, I'm going to be using the extra area around here to test out my tools. So if you look at those extra marks, those stray marks, some of them are really fine, like these here, and some are a little bit wider, like these over here. I'm going to try to work with pretty much very fine lines, like you see in the sphere tonight on our die, but in any case, you do have to use the black of the material for black, so you have to get kind of tricky sometimes and work around the black, like we've done to create these cast shadows next to the two forms, the sphere and the cube. So I'll bring this back. You might see this reappear while we test out tools, or if I happen to change tools in the course of the drawing. Scratchboard is it's pretty it's got my name on the back, that way I know it's mine.
Right, you gotta claim it.
Yeah, that's right.
You gotta claim it.
It's kind of like it's like thin poster board. It's not exactly scratch paper, which is quite a bit thinner. So it's got a white piece of paper that is I don't know exactly how thick it is, but it's kind of like cardstock. And then over the white is actually plastic. There's a real thin layer of plastic, and the scratching usually doesn't tear the plastic unless you get really, really vigorous with it, really vigorous and with your marks. And then over that is some sort of black material, matte, and I believe it's a type of an ink. It's pretty matte, you know, as far as the surface. It's not that shiny. And one thing about it is I try to avoid using an eraser on it. You can draw directly on Scratchboard with a pencil, but if you make a mistake and you need to use an eraser, it actually changes the surface a little bit. Well, let's just test it out. There you go. So you can see it looks a little grayer in that area now. So I just try to avoid using an eraser. And for that reason, I'm going to make our drawing on paper and then transfer it onto the Scratchboard, and then we'll start scratching. So we're going to try to make our drawing kind of quick tonight, and then you can see there are a lot of little marks in here to get to those light values, and we have a very light colored, naturally light colored subject, even though there's plenty of gray shadows on there. So we're going to make thousands of little marks, or at least a death by 1,000 cuts. That's what we could have called this one. I don't remember what the theme was, but it could have been death by a thousand cuts. But we'll be okay by the end of this. I hope. There are some dangerous tools. Let's take a look at the tools next.
Yeah, and speaking of tools and materials, I forgot to mention this, but I have linked underneath this video in the description to products that you can buy from Amazon. These are affiliate links, of course, which means that if you do purchase, we make a small commission at no additional cost to you, but there is Scratchboard paper that you can pick up, and also Scratchboard tools. Now, the tools you're using tonight, though, are not the ones that are included in that pack. These are more like tools you might find around your house.
Yeah, that's right. Just kind of common art tools that are relatively sharp, not necessarily intended for Scratchboard. That's what we'll be using tonight.
And one more thing I forgot to mention, but many of you already know, if in the chat box, if you have a question or comment that's directed at Ashley or I, if you put it in all capital letters, that'll help me see it a little bit easier since I'm in the chat box tonight. And I already see one buddy ask, Ashley, what do you use for scratching?
Well, that's a great question. That's what we're going to talk about next. I've got a couple of tools laid out already. This is just what we call a needle tool. It's a little bit flexible. Maybe you can see it bend a little bit, and I don't like that. Makes it feel a little bit like a brush, and I want a more rigid tool than that. So this is a common tool in maybe a clay modeling class used to scratch, or rather score clay when you're attaching two pieces of clay. So what I do with these needle tools, and you can order them from art suppliers, is I cut them down. I make caps out of erasers. It makes it safe for me to put it in my pocket. So I cut them down and then sharpen them. So if you wanted to do that, if you were going to make your own tools, there we go. You just need a sharpening stone, also called a wet rock, and trim some sort of a needle tool down so that it's not flexible anymore. And then I just kind of rub that back and forth, usually in some water, until I get a pretty sharp point. And when the point dulls, I can just sort of resharpen it. So that's one way you can make your own tools from a clay modeling needle tool. So that's one option. One of my favorite tools is really just a plain razor blade. I know it looks really dangerous, but it's useful in all kinds of ways in the art room. And you just sometimes with the weight, just the weight of the razor blade is enough to make marks. Let's test it out. Let's see what kind of marks we get with the naked razor blade. All right, that's not too bad. They're a little bumpy. Marks. Yeah, a little bumpy. If I give it more pressure, of course, I'll get a really white mark. Look at that. So your pressure does count. It does matter here. Let me try the other side. We got two sides. Oh yeah, I think I like this side better. The other side must have had a little burr on it or something, a microscopic burr that was causing it to skip a little bit. I don't know if you can tell.
Do you think maybe you might have used that razor earlier to shave and you forgot about it?
I might have. Yeah. Might have, yeah. Yep. I like to live dangerously. Now, the tool I plan to use is an old Exacto Blade. So this Exacto Blade, actually the tip of it is broken. It's been chipped off a little bit. But just like the regular razor blade, it's got, because of the chip, it's really got 2 points. It's got the point along the blade edge and then the point along the back side. So let's test out the blade side, and then we'll flip it over and try it upside down. And I have a feeling I'm going to be working with the Exacto upside down or with the cutting part facing up. So let's see. Yeah, that's not too good. I don't like that at all.
Right,
now let me flip it over. All right, that's a little bit more consistent. Yeah, I like those a little bit better. Let me try this one as well. The homemade needle tool. Those are a little bit broad, so I think this one would need to be sharpened again. So it looks like of the tools that I've tried, you want to try them every time. You need a test strip or a test piece to make sure your tool is going to give you consistent marks. If you're going to be working on a subject more than once, make sure you have the same type of marks from drawing session to drawing session. There we go. Oh, I like those. Look at that. That's fantastic.
Those are good.
Yeah. So we're going to be using the broken tip of an Exacto Blade upside down. Looks like that's the winner tonight. All right. Like I said, I might break that back out, but we're going to go ahead and move our Scratchboard. And I've just got a really thin piece of drawing paper with a rectangle already drawn on it. That's 4 inches by 3 inches. That's what we'll make our drawing on. And then I'm going to make a graphite transfer onto the Scratchboard. All right, if you've never made a graphite transfer before, you just make a drawing on one side of a piece of paper, drawing paper, and then on the back side, you want to cover it with a soft lead pencil. Okay, so this has already been hit a little bit with an ebony pencil. Looks like I don't have an ebony pencil here. You can also use a number 2 pencil. It's just like a School Smart number 2 pencil. Probably should darken that up a little bit. And then we'll be able to make a tracing. And just enough of this graphite will come off onto our Scratchboard product to give us a copy without having to do any erasing. If we do any erasing, we'll do it on the paper. All right, I guess that's about it. If there are any more questions, we can answer those, or we'll start the timer and start drawing.
There's another sneaky way that you can transfer the image, and when you get to that,
With pressure?
I'll tell you, yeah, with pressure.
Okay,
Yeah. All right. Are you ready for the timer?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. You can bring that up when I start scratching. When I get deep into my marks.
Yeah,
that's right.
Let's see. Are you ready for the timer?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Here we go. 45 minutes.
All right. So the dice has a reflection underneath it, so it's really like drawing a rectangular prism, and I might slightly exaggerate the perspective here. So let's see. Let's just get started with some lines.
So I'm
going to draw lines that flare out from one another for the vertical edges, just to exaggerate the perspective a little bit. There we are.
Dice is 2 die. Is that right?
I think so.
Multiple die.
I think so. So this is a die.
Okay. That would fall into a death by, what did you say?
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Because something does die, I guess.
Oh, you're right.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
I guess you could think of it that way.
I like that.
And technically speaking, for all of you perspective people out there, this die, you could draw it in 3-point perspective, which I think is kind of what Ashley's doing.
A little bit. Yeah, I've got these lines. They're all slightly flaring towards each other, or flaring away from each other as we go up. So that's right. And like I said, we can make changes on here, and then we'll take it to the Scratchboard.
Edie asked, how will you be able to see the graphite on the Scratchboard, please?
Barely. No, it'll show up.
And
the graphite is a gray media, and so it should show up.
Yes. Buddy says, would you recommend the use of a transfer paper?
Yeah, well, graphite, you can buy graphite transfer paper. I just don't have any, and it's so cheap just to turn your drawing paper into your transfer paper. I'll be honest, graphite transfer paper is really thin, and it tears easy, so I almost find it a little bit annoying to work with.
And something else about transfer paper is sometimes it's really hard to erase or remove the marks that you transfer.
Yeah, even though it's graphite, it's a little stickier of a graphite, maybe? I don't know. All right, then we'll just...
Okay, Jan says dice and die are both valid singular.
Okay. I appreciate that.
I guess it's like deer.
A deer?
Well, there's a deer. There's a bunch of deer.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Like the word deer.
Yeah. Well, that's the same word. It's just used plural. And okay, I guess it is.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I was trying to think how you could shorten deer. D.
D.
One deer is D. Yeah. Okay.
Just make a grunt sound.
There we go. Now we need to get some, we've got rounded tips on here, and it'll be interesting to handle those. But let's go ahead and start working on our dots. So I'm going to put some guidelines through here. This is a little tip. If you need things in rows, just make rows.
Make a couple rows.
Yeah. And then we'll go this way, and we'll put some circles in there.
Jan points out sheep is the same way.
All right, so we'll get a circle here.
Brenda asked, would graphite powder be a good option for transferring? I'm not sure.
Graphite powder, you might not get enough of it on there.
Yeah.
That would be my only... Sometimes it's hard to get...
It would make a big old mess.
Sometimes it's hard to get really dark with the graphite powder. All right, now if your dots are, get them as close as you can, but it is a sketch tonight. And we'll do the same thing for our 5 on the left side here. We'll give us some...
Glitch Intended Gaming asks, what type of paper would you recommend for colored pencil? And I'll answer that one for you. I just recommend some black paper. I think Strathmore makes some black Artigan paper that's really nice to work on. You could use a white colored pencil if you want to go that route, or you could also use a white gel pen. That might be interesting.
All right, and on the other side, just wrap these lines right around. And we'll make any adjustments to our ellipses or our proportion, and then make our transfer. I think I'll bring this edge in a little bit. Don't want to spend too long on proportion, but it does need to be more of a cube than not. All right, now we do have a reflection down here, so we may as well keep our stripes going.
And this image does have quite a bit of gradation.
Yeah, it does.
So that'll be interesting with
even on one side. I mean, if you look at this left side, it's pretty different from corner to corner. So we're gonna have to be careful with that. But honestly, it's hard to get too light with the Scratchboard. No matter how much you scratch, well, not no matter, but you may think you've gotten pretty light, and there's always seems like there's more Scratchboard to take off. Just bring these sides up a little bit. Reflection might have been a bit long.
All right, buddy, ask, how do you find where exactly to place the dots?
I don't think mine are exactly placed, but they're close. But you know, they do kind of travel in rows. So if you want to think about these marks that I put on here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pretty much like 5 stripes in both directions. And then I've used the second and the 4th stripe in both directions for the dots that are in a quadrant, in a quad. Okay, so the 5th dot just kind of landed in the middle on this side. I hope that helps a little bit. That's the purpose.
Yeah, I think the guidelines are really helpful and make it a lot easier.
And of course, you know, the dots are pretty faint over here on this side. All right, that's pretty good. Now we're ready to make our transfers. That'll be the full size of our subject right there. So we'll go ahead. You can see, actually, I've already folded my paper a little bit. My Scratchboard, I have taped it down to just a regular piece of cardboard.
There's a piece of dice on the table.
Whoopsie.
Oh, you can leave it.
Sorry, Matt.
It'll bring me good luck.
We made a transfer. We've already made one transfer. Usually I don't cover the back of my drawing until after I've made the drawing.
But you did that at the same time.
Right, I did that at the same time. So now we've got an extra. Can I scratch this one?
Yes,
no, I'm just
go ahead,
kidding.
Scratch it.
I'm just kidding. All right,
put the date on there.
I've already got some folds around here, and I'm just going to lay that in.
Got to put Ashley was here.
You know, I've been to Natural Bridge, where Washington wrote. Well, he wrote it everywhere he could. George Washington. Washington was here. He signed everything. But in any case, I have seen one place anyway where George Washington scratched
started that.
Yeah,
the whole thing.
I don't know if people probably did it on walls in Rome. You know, but he was famous for writing
Copernicus
Washington
in Latin.
All right, here we go. Now, don't transfer the guidelines. Just the dice, its reflection, and the dots.
So while you're doing this, there's another way that you can transfer an image, and it's really a preference thing. But if you do the same thing Ashley's doing, but not put graphite on the back, you can use a tool that's going to make an indentation. Now, they make indentation tools that are used a lot of times for like colored pencil drawing, where you want to push down or emboss parts of the paper. And you can do the same kind of thing to transfer the drawing onto the Scratchboard paper, because the Scratchboard paper does allow for some indentations. And those indentations will work as guidelines for you to scratch out.
Yeah, they show up pretty well.
By doing that, you don't have to worry about the graphite showing up or any erasing or anything like that. But this drawing is simple enough that the graphite transfer works just as well. And the problem with the indentation method is that those indentations are there. So if someone takes a really close look at your Scratchboard etching, you'll probably be able to see those indentations.
Almost done with our quick transfer. And then we have a lot of mark making to do.
And if you don't have an indenting tool, you can also use like a ballpoint pen or something like that.
Yeah, just they're perfect. They're very hard. And this is a number 2 pencil. It's pretty hard also. All right. I hope something happened. Let's take the paper off and find out. All right, there it is. Hopefully you guys can see that. When I tilt it in the light, you can see it how I see it. So it shows up pretty well for me. All right, now I'm going to have to break out my reading glasses because these are some pretty tiny marks. So I like to call them my drawing glasses. And we're going to start on the lightest side, the whitest side, because we can't mess that up. There's no way I'm going to take off too many marks on the light or the white side. I think that my line needs to go up a little higher, so I'll just work over it. And I'm going to use the vertical lines on the two edges, and actually still kind of wish I had one through here, so we'll just add that in. Just as a guide for how what direction our strokes are going to go. We're going to cross hatch, but I'm going to start out with just hatching. So here goes. Oops, I've already made a white mark unintentionally.
So a good way to think about this is, I think someone mentioned this, it's kind of like pen and ink in reverse. I think someone already mentioned that in the chat box, but that's a good way to think about it. The thing that you have to be careful of is when we're working on a white surface and we're adding dark material to the surface, it's a whole lot easier to draw outlines and think in terms of outlining things like most of us learn how to draw anyway. In this particular case, though, you have to think about adding the light values and leaving areas of darker values. So it's reverse than what we naturally do intuitively just because we're used to adding dark material onto a white surface. So just be mindful of that. It's kind of like drawing on a chalkboard, a blackboard, if you will, with white chalk.
Yeah, it's very much like
so
that.
It's kind of the similar thing there. And it might take a minute or two to get used to it. That's okay.
I went ahead and put some lines all the way down this this plane or this side, just to keep me straight. I work and fill in between them. Of course, honestly, I haven't taken off very much material at all. This side will get quite a bit lighter than this first pass. We're just trying to establish where our dot is, where our edges are.
Now, I think I heard you say at one point that when you started painting, you think about the darkest areas first. Is that right? Yeah,
with a painting or a drawing on white paper, I like to find the darkest area first and go ahead and make it as dark as my medium will allow, if that's required. If there's something that's close to black in the artwork, here I'm finding the lightest area first because black is already on the Scratchboard. It is black, and so if we go ahead and find something really light from the beginning, we'll have our full range of value in place. And then we can use the lighter area and the darker area, in this case the background color, to help fill in all those grays. We can judge the grays against the two extremes.
Okay, I think we got a couple of questions here.
Right.
Just to remind you guys, if you put your questions or comments that's directed at Ashley or I in capital letters, that'll help me understand that it is a question or comment that needs to be addressed here. James asked, is it like sand art? And no, I think sand art is completely different. I think sand art is where you're moving sand around with light underneath. Is that
yeah, I think that's right. Like? I've seen that. Very cool. I've seen people do it with their fingers or their hands.
Yeah,
to great effect.
Yeah. So this is actually a piece of paper that has a layer of it's a white piece of paper that has a layer of plastic over the top of it. Is that right?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's required. It's just how this brand is made.
Right.
We've made Scratchboard in the classroom before, and the marks it's very easy to scratch off homemade Scratchboard, almost too easy. So I prefer the store-bought stuff, but we've tried to make it with wax, like just a clear wax crayon or a white crayon on white paper, and then use India ink over top of it.
Now, Ashley's working on Scratchboard paper, which is really scratch paper. And there is actual Scratchboard, which is a little bit more rigid and a little bit more precise than the scratch paper.
Well, I've seen scratch paper that's much thinner than this.
Yeah, I probably have some.
It's the cheap stuff.
Let's see. Dragon Moons 13 Artworks ask, working with negative space, and in every drawing or painting you're working with positive and negative space, but I think that what you're referring to is not necessarily negative painting or negative space that Ashley's dealing with. He's just doing the reverse. He's still addressing the positive space at this point, which is the dice.
Still touchable, Still touchable.
The negative space in this image would be the blackness around the dice.
Right, and we don't really have a cast shadow that we'll be kind of working around in this case. We have a reflection instead. All right, so I want to get whiter on this side. It's actually not very white right now, but I'm going to go ahead and move on a little bit. There is a super white area up here on this corner that we'll use to find the whitest part of this side as well. But let me go ahead and get some marks across the left side as well, and we will be cross-hatching, so I'm going to use marks that follow the bottom edge of the form as well as the vertical edge of the form, but at least I'm starting on the two vertical sides with vertical lines. So here goes.
Ernest asked, Matt, would that be like a Pounce Wheel? I'm not sure what I said that would be like a Pounce Wheel. I don't even know what a Pounce Wheel is. What is it?
Sounds familiar.
Do you know what a Pounce Wheel is?
I'm not sure. Oh yeah. Is it used in with fabric? Do you use it with fabric?
Oh, maybe. Oh, I think is that the circular thing that has the little spikes?
If it's not,
maybe that's what I'm Ernest is talking about. That you roll over that has spikes. If that's what you're referring to, that's not the same as the indenting tool. In fact, I think I have an indenting tool in the drawer, and at some point Ashley might can pull it out and show it to you. But if I'll try to remind you of that at some point. I don't want to disturb you now. Key says, is it similar to wax resist etching? And I don't think, it depends on what you're talking about, wax resist etching. There is a thing called batik, which is like a wax resist. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about.
Etch into that? It might be similar to
or
that.
If you're talking about like a crayon etching where you use wax-based crayons and remove. If you are talking about a crayon etching, yes, this is very similar to a crayon etching.
Yep.
In fact, that's how you would make your own Scratchboard. Is
basically just white crayon or clear crayon.
Yeah, with
ink over it.
Exactly. So if you're talking about crayon etching, yes, it's similar. If you're talking about batik, it's completely different from batik. I doubt you're talking about batik though. Let's see. Okay, Pat says Pounce Wheel is the little wheel with spikes. Yes. Okay, we got some clarification there.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. I would not use a Pounce Wheel to try to lay out where things are. You'll probably end up taking some of the ink off.
Yeah, you have little dots on there.
Yeah, DB says is an indenting tool like a pen with a small metal ball as a point. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Just trying to find and preserve our dots right now.
Jan says this seems far less forgiving than white charcoal on black paper. Actually, white charcoal, any charcoal drawing is actually very forgiving.
Sure, that's why we use them in like drawing one in college.
And this is actually not as bad as you think, because if you do make a mistake, you can go back with a little bit of ink. Granted that you're using an ink that dries to the same value and finish.
Well, if you found that ink, I haven't. I've tried. Now, if I have a really small spot of white that doesn't need to be there, I'll use a really fine point drawing pen to fix it. But if it's a whole area that needs to be filled in, usually that ink looks darker.
Yeah, well, one thing you could try is maybe a felt tip pen for some of those small areas. But you have to be careful with that. Just like fixing mistakes in an ink drawing, if you're using some white media to fix those mistakes, sometimes that can look a little bit odd. But yeah, you can. You can fix minor mistakes on here. You can't necessarily start over, because once you've scratched off of the ink, once you reapply ink, you're more than likely scratched off some of that resist layer that allows it to work, and then that area is no longer scratchable anymore. So,
well, you know how I fix Scratchboard? Photoshop.
Yeah.
This is a great medium for like chapter illustrations in books, where it has to be printed in just black and white, just like a pen and ink would be. It's a good choice for that kind of a thing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make a few marks in the wider area. They're a little bit more horizontal, following the bottom edge of our form.
Jan says, so this is about as forgiving as chainsaw surgery then. I would say that this is more forgiving than chainsaw surgery. Just by about a foot. Luna says, you can buy Scratchboard Fix ink. So there is an ink that is out there that you can purchase.
Matt, do you have any of that?
I don't have any of that now.
Pressure's
so don't
on.
make a mistake. Brent Does Art says they do make Scratchboard tools. Yes. And I've linked to some below, and I actually ordered them myself. I have Scratchboard tools here, but this particular tool set looked like it had some better tools than I have, so I went ahead and ordered it. Let's see.
And I've used those before in the classroom as well, but I kind of like the fun of finding my own tools. All right, just getting a little whiter on the lightest side now. Just stretching that value range out a bit more. Excuse me. Now these corners are soft, so some of the light kind of wraps around these corners. It's important. That's why dice roll, right? They've got rounded corners. And sometimes the edges or those rounded corners are where the light is strongest or brightest.
This is really a very methodical form of art making. So if you enjoy pen and ink drawing, very detailed pen and ink drawing, then you'll definitely like Scratchboard. Yeah, I do feel like Scratchboard's a little bit quicker than pen and ink drawing, done in the same way.
I don't really think of it as a sketching medium because the marks are so fine, but that's what makes it fun on Getting Sketchy. All right, we do have a gradation from corner to corner on the left side, and I'm going to leave that alone for a little bit and come back to it because there's quite a bit of light on the top as well. And of course there's a little bit of reflected light on the back side of the top plane, so I want to go ahead and make that first. We'll use marks that are diagonal upwards towards the right, at least to start with. Not too afraid of getting too light on this back edge because of that reflected light. And then there's that really nice corner highlight. It's very, very white in there. Whiter down that edge.
You just said that this is not really considered a sketchy medium.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could use it in a more sketchy manner,
sure,
like quickly. And you can also use it in a very controlled manner. There are some etchings out there that are ridiculously controlled.
Had sketchy etching sometimes.
Yeah.
So I guess you could have that same temperament. I'm trying to have that temperament tonight myself. All right.
Buddy says, I'm guessing how to name Scratchboard in German since I can't find them. This is also called scrapeboard. A lot of people call it scrapeboard. So you might try to
maybe you can look up Scratchboard on your computer and then have the computer translate the page. Sometimes I do that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start finding some marks downhill towards the right. This top side is pretty light, but it does have some shadow on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a series of marks through here. Then we'll just keep building up marks between these, more in the light areas. Looks like we've got about halfway through our time together. Now, this is a sort of a geometric form, not very organic, but Matt, in your classroom years ago, someone did a baby. Do you remember that drawing?
Oh, a baby?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that was really organic, with skin.
Yes, and she did
it
not.
Looked so good.
She used swirly marks.
She used squiggly little marks.
Yes,
yeah,
and it took her forever. That student's name was Savannah. Can you believe I remember that? That was.
Yeah. I got a memory like a steel trap.
Well, that was an early on student too. I had her probably the third year I was teaching. So that was, oh God.
It was almost 20 years ago.
It was over 20 years. It was around 20 years ago. Yeah.
Well, I still think about that drawing when I'm teaching Scratchboard, because I do tend to press my kids towards organic subject matter. Now, that way their marks can be a little freer and looser, but she came up with her own unique mark to handle the smoothness of skin. So any mark, any mark will do. I'm going to use some marks that are kind of don't follow the corners a little bit for where we transition from a vertical plane into the horizontal plane of our dice. Just to try to kind of communicate that rounded edge. It's pretty white.
Him asked, have y'all ever used this multicolored scratch paper? There is multicolored, and there's some with gold like and silver backing.
Kind of a rainbow color.
Yeah.
Yeah, my own children, I think, used to have some of that rainbow colored scratch paper. And a lot of times in the stores, in my area, that's what I see more of, is a colored background or a gold or a silver backing. Of course, I like the white stuff. It's just kind of traditional. But I think the silver and gold are really cool too. All right, we'll start taking a little bit more off the top, just a little off the top, and then we'll be able to go back and continue to make the other sides wider where we need to, comparing them to the top. So we're kind of getting all of our lines in place as far as the direction goes. Then we'll spend a little bit more time honing in. I'm trying to make adjustments to the drawing as I go, honing in on our values. The cast shadow, the reflection, hopefully won't take us too long, since it's much darker in value. Try to pick a subject. I really wanted to do something like the eye, but of course I've already done an eye this season. You'll remember the stamping drawing that I did. I think it was my first drawing of the season, using an ink pad and an eraser. So I didn't want to do two eyes in one season. And then also, if I remember, that eye example that I did took quite a bit longer than 45 minutes.
Okay, Shadow Rage asks, is it normal behavior to get bored fast and switch between 5 mediums all the time? Pen and ink to pen to ink to Copics to digital, etc.
That is not normal. Get a hold of yourself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Actually, that's part of why Matt and I are teachers, because we like to switch media a lot ourselves.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I necessarily get bored of mediums. I just get excited by another medium and remember how much I love it. So I like to move around from. If I work with pastels for a period of time, then I want to do something a little bit more rigid.
Yeah.
If I'm working with something that's very precise and rigid, then I want to loosen up and do something that's looser. That's kind of how it goes with me. But yeah,
it does help you avoid boredom.
I would just
it up a little bit.
I would just tell you, Shadow Rage, that it is normal behavior to want to create in lots of different mediums. Just be sure you're finishing your piece before you go to your next one. That's really important, because if you don't finish and you kind of get in the habit of not finishing, then you're probably going to feel like you're not accomplishing anything. So I would just just finish your artwork before you go to another.
A lot of times medium. I lose interest in my artwork when it's about 95% finished.
I get excited then.
I will start to lose interest, and I sometimes have to force myself to pull myself over the line. Now we got to be careful. We don't want the top side to get as light as the vertical side on the right, and I don't think we're in danger of that yet. For these dots, they're going to be kind of fuzzy around the edges, but one thing that can help is to start a mark right on the edge of the dot and move away from it. So you might have to move your hand in a couple of different directions in order to have sharper edges on some of your dies dots. right, now this way over here, I feel like the very edge here is pretty light because we've got our wraparound corner. And then it gets just a little subtly darker as soon as we come in from that corner. Hopefully I'm hoping the reflection is what's going to give our subject interest. Of course, we've got little tiny reflections in the dots to handle at the very end. I'm saving those for the very end. All right. We do have a little bit of a shadow back here, so I'm still working to make that shadow apparent.
Okay, Shadow Rage asks, what would you call a level that you need to get a job, say in game development or animation studio? I'm not sure. Level 27?
You mean like skill, like skill level?
Yeah, I wouldn't
Proficient?
say. What's the golden standard for those kind of jobs? I have no idea, but I would say that in game development, I would say that's probably a pretty competitive space.
Yeah.
And I would say you probably need to have an understanding of how games are actually, or game characters anyway, and their environments are actually built and created, not just draw them. Because having an understanding of how they're actually built in virtual 3D space is going to be an important element in how you consider how you create your images.
I assume that's part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I do have a student that I haven't talked to since she graduated college, but I know that she secured a job in character development or character design. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that means she develops them and then passes them on to somebody else that then starts to work them up in sort of a digital three-dimensional form, or if that's part of her job as well. I'd like to know.
Well, yeah, there's certain limitations.
You're working on a team.
There's limitations that the software that they use to code games has, and having a knowledge of those limitations is probably helpful to the illustrators that come up with character designs or environment designs and so on. And I would say it's probably different for every studio that you are considering. As far as the qualifications go, I've never worked in an animation studio or for any type of game development before, so I have no idea.
I interviewed with an animation studio over 20 years ago, but my artwork really wasn't suitable because I wasn't really. I had brought pastel and charcoal drawings. They weren't really the right fit. That was a long time ago, and they did some really nice work in that studio. It was so time consuming back then. Still is, I guess. All right, we'll get a few marks going the other way on this top side, just to relate. And maybe just hint at our rounded corner, rounded edges. I'm mostly hatching the dice, and when one direction is sort of dominating on each of the sides. But still want to throw some marks in the alternate direction, the alternate choice. All right. Got a few more marks. They're almost level on the rounded corner on the back side of our top left edge. And I'm just going to have to stare at it for a minute. All right. one thing I really like to do is just stop and stare at my drawing, and we ain't got time for that. But it's still important sometimes to take a breath.
Yeah, I'd say taking a breath is pretty important. You might take a few breaths.
I've been holding my breath. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get down in the reflection for a little while. And of course, it's same story, just a lot less lines. Its bright point is right here at the very bottom. So we'll come back to that a couple of times. Actually, kind of looking for my darker value first. Now, in the photograph, the top of the dice is actually slightly out of focus, and the reflection where the die meets the reflection is the point of focus. But I'm okay if the reflection is a little bit looser in the artwork.
Now, are you going to put those highlights in the cavities?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that'll make a difference, I think.
Saving that for the end.
Like highlights in an eye.
I'm trying to keep my pressure relatively consistent. I'm trying to use about the same width mark throughout this sketch.
Edie asked, do people collect Scratchboard art, please? I've never seen any in a museum or gallery. And yeah, I could see why you say that. I don't think I've seen any Scratchboard art.
I think it's more of an illustration medium.
Yeah, it's definitely more of an illustration medium.
It's produced. It's produced like I mentioned before in a chapter illustration at the very front of a book chapter, something that needs to be printed in just black and white.
It does a pretty good job of mimicking block printing too.
Yeah,
if you use it in a certain way.
I was thinking of that.
Without the block or the printing.
I feel like MC Escher might would have appreciated this medium. I just don't know if he ever used it. Being a printmaker and working so much with lines and line quality.
Yeah, I'm watching a discussion in the chat box about the game development animation question. And Jan brings up an interesting point about with AI coming fast.
Gosh,
already competitive.
I can't even talk about it. By the time I finish my sentence, there'll be another AI that's been released.
Right. We'll probably get even worse, the competition.
Next week, Matt and I aren't even going to be here. It's just going to be a simulation of both of us.
Are we even here this week?
I'm not sure. Who are you?
Double arigato, Mr. Roboto. Let's see. What was your... Oh, Shadow Rage asked, what was your period of learning limbo, if you had any? Mine was 6 years.
A period where you didn't learn anything new?
Yeah, I'm not sure what learning limbo means. I feel like I'm in learning limbo all the time. I think that's a good place to be. I think you should always be constantly be learning and be curious about how you can get better. And sometimes maybe the learning limbo comment there is...
Maybe it's the opposite of that.
Sometimes
like a time when you haven't been learning.
Sometimes I feel a little bit like I'm lost. Sometimes when I'm working with a new medium. Maybe that's what you're referring to, learning limbo. And sometimes it's okay to feel a little bit lost for a little period of time and when you're exploring things. So I think you should always be learning constantly.
Got a little tiny white highlight in our reflection. Go ahead and put that one in. And I do wish this one dot was more consistent, but I don't want to over scratch it.
You know, with this subject, it's just difficult, I think, to get those subtle shapes in the reflection, you know?
A little bit.
Yeah.
The bigger we can work, the easier that kind of business is.
Yeah.
And is one of our
subtle.
One of our limitations. We're working pretty small tonight, just for the just due to time. It's a sketch.
Okay. Shadow Rage clarifies. I was practicing for 6 years, but no progress until now.
That's how I was interpreting Limbo.
Okay.
Well, I'm afraid with teaching, we're constantly forced to learn new stuff. So I don't feel like I've hit many periods like that. Partly because we're following what's contemporary, what's cool, and that pulls us along.
Yeah, I would say to use Shadow Rage. Maybe during those 6 years you weren't really serious, and now you're serious. So now maybe you're paying a little bit more attention to whether
serious
you're improving
business.
or not.
I don't want to run out of time on the highlights, so I'm going to go ahead and put some of them in, and then we'll refine our values as long as we have time to. Because these highlights are actually in the area of our photo that's out of focus.
Oh yeah, I like those highlights.
You can just, sometimes I stipple a little bit, almost like just take out little chip marks. I think that's pretty effective.
And you know, a lot of Savannah's Scratchboard of that baby was like that.
Yeah, just tiny little dots almost. I mean, it's not exactly stippling because you do have to move the tool, laterally a little bit to get it off, but they can be really small, and it creates a really nice gradation. It's working in there. I think it's working. To have an area that's cleanly scratched out, and then little chips that sort of dissipate around them. Just gonna fade away. Gives it a little bit of that sort of blurry out of focus feeling. All right, now the highlights are not consistent on this side, so just want to be careful with that and make sure they're not all exactly the same. The one in the center die seems to be the strongest, or the center cavity. Just about lost that dot. May just leave that one alone. All right, so I feel like maybe I can put a little mark here and more of a white spot on the right side of that cavity. I think that helped. Okay, I've got 2 minutes, so I just want to think about where I need to go lighter in the time that we have.
Okay, Shadow Rage says again, can practice smart, not hard apply to drawing? I heard some artists say that. I think practice smart, not hard could... I don't know. I mean, I don't know the difference really between practice smart and practicing hard. I feel like if you're practicing smart or wisely, then that is a form of hard practice.
I don't know if work harder, not smarter applies to art making itself, like it would in maybe something that can be physically demanding, or you could use a better tool or a machine to help you. That's how I think of smarter, not
Practice
harder.
smart, not hard sounds really good. And I do think that there should be some direction to what you're doing. So, in other words, not just aimlessly
that's
making
good.
Marks. You need to have some direction.
I mean, one way I would say I practice smart is I start with geometric forms, and then we shapes or forms, and then work towards organic forms, something that's got more variety. So I always start my own students out just learning a new medium on something that where the subject matter isn't going to be daunting, to draw, so they can focus on the medium itself, and then apply that what they've learned to maybe subject matter that becomes more difficult over time. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Suzanne says highlights are the life of the drawing, and Edie says if you're always learning, you always feel like a beginner. And Brent does art.
I like that.
Brent does art. Says highlighting the pips made a huge difference.
Yeah. It was that part's important in this drawing, I believe.
Brenda says, "Wow, the highlight, such a difference. I love this drawing, but not trying it yet."
All right, I guess we're approaching the out of time, and I'm not dissatisfied with the values that I've got. Probably could still be lighter in the top. I could probably still fiddle with this for quite a while.
Yeah, that's one you could keep messing with, and the more you mess with it,
come home,
the more subtle transitions you create.
Yeah. Right? That's something that attracted me to this. I mean, compared to a cube like this that I just made up from my mind, where the sides are consistent in terms of their value on each plane, there's a lot of subtlety on this dice where it's just each side is just slightly concave, I believe, and so we're picking up a gradation across the otherwise what appears to be flat surfaces. And I think that's what's nice about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that it is kind of slightly concave. You can see it.
Yeah. I wonder if it has to do with the manufacturing process, just the way the plastic is molded or dries, or I don't know. It's just a shrink. Just plastic shrink when it dries. We're just gonna go a minute longer. Do we have time, Matt?
Yeah, the timer is a suggestion.
Yeah, we'll just go again.
Like it always is.
Of course, you can also get scratch happy and take off too much. I'm in a danger zone.
Highway to the
danger
zone.
I feel like I better stop. So, or I might I can't stop touching it. Might get scratch happy otherwise. All right, I think that's acceptable sketch for me. Maybe just a little more over here.
All right, very good.
I think we're good. So, Scratchboard.
And you did not die.
And I did not die. Ha ha. Ha.
Yeah, I'm surprised there weren't more jokesters in the chat box tonight talking about the dice.
Dying dice.
Just a few last questions here. Suzanne says, please do a part 2 so we can see all the finishing lines. Well, that will go against what we do here on Getting Sketchy, where we try to do it in 45 minutes.
That's true. It's a sketch, and sometimes you just, when you're sketching, you've got a limited space or limited time. But it's important to sketch. That is part of that. I guess that's part of the smart practice. I would say that. Musicians practice songs many times before they perform them or play them for other people, and I think it's important to practice passages of your finished artwork or painting sometimes in a sketchbook, or even partially practice with paint if you're making a painting, and then take what you did and do it a second time, or maybe it's the third time when that passage actually makes it in part of a broader composition. So I think it's good to work in your sketchbook, or sketch as in terms of using paint. You can sketch with paint. I consider myself more of a painter than a drawer, and I do that. I'll practice little areas or little parts of a painting on a scrap canvas, and then do it again. That way I'm not doing it for the first time in the version that I want to show people. So that's part of the smart practice, I would say.
And Suzanne, going back to your question, comment, please do a part 2 so we can see the finishing lines. There are a couple of live lesson series that are recorded on Scratchboard. So if you want to see a longer process, that's part of the membership program. And Shadow Rage asked, do you practice/play any instruments? And I play the drums, and I've played the drums for 30 some years.
As long as you've been drawing.
No, not as long as I've been drawing.
Okay.
No.
You didn't play when you were real little?
No, I started playing the drums, I think,
middle school?
7th grade.
Okay.
Yeah. I play the guitar a little bit too, but I don't consider myself a guitarist at all.
I played the guitar more before my son started playing classical guitar, and now it's embarrassing. I feel like I'm embarrassed when I play the guitar around the house because he's gotten pretty good.
Terry says, just a reminder to my fellow artists, hit the like button. Yeah,
Yes.
thanks for that, Terry.
Yes.
Edie says, how did you guys do on timed tests in school?
I love to take tests. I love to take standardized tests with the little bubble sheets. Oh, I love those things.
And
So,
that
I know that's an anomaly.
That
Most people
proves
don't
how crazy and weird Ashley is. I did.
You know, my favorite kind of tests, Matt, and these are all timed, right? Because the period only has a certain length. Those were the tests in college where you got one question in a blue book and you just had to write as much as you could or answer it in essay form. And, you know, it was so nerve-wracking, wondering what that one question was going to be. But once I got the question, you know, all the nerves kind of disappeared. And so I always like test taking.
I think I may have done one test like that. But no, I didn't like tests. I did well on them because I'm competitive and I wanted to beat everybody. But I did not enjoy tests. Let's see. Pat says, "Wow, thank you."
Oh yeah.
Shadow Rage says,
welcome.
"Can you scratch my back?" A Scarf and Tea says, "Awesome work, Ashley. Really nice
Thank you.
result,
Thank
Ashley." Jan says, "Updoot." I'm not sure that's that. I think that's
Thank
a thumbs up. Looks great. Thanks. You're a good drawer. Says,
I appreciate that.
Shadow Rage. AI can't draw hands. Suzanne says, great, thank you. Let's see.
That's funny.
All right, I think that was the last one with the capital letters. And yeah, zooming in closer on that dice makes a big difference.
I think it helps you
can
see the marks well.
Yeah, you can see it
Probably
a
should have
lot
been.
better. Yeah.
I was showing the entire 3x4 inches while I was working, but I don't think it was really necessary to. It's kind of nice to get them real close. I think.
Well, you know, I feel like that composition is heavy
past our
on. Yeah,
limit.
you went too far. Went too far.
There we go.
There you go. That composition is heavy on the bottom. It feels heavy.
Well, nothing a paper cutter can't fix.
Yeah, I know.
Just chop a little of that. I'm just reframing it right now. So,
all right.
Don't look at all that empty space.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go.
All right. Well, you know what that means. It is time to figure out and find out what I am going to be.
That's right.
What
does your future
I'm
hold?
Have next week. So let's go ahead and go over here to the board and find out.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Let's Get Creative with your contestants, Matt and Ashley. And now tonight's Let's Get Creative Challenge.
All right. So as most of you already know, you guys voted on the creative prompt for next week for me. And, well, I know what the prompt is, but let's find out what it is here. Let me push the button and find out which one it is.
The suspense is killing me.
I don't know which way I should look here in the. Okay, so it's Back to the Future, and I'm going to be real honest. I really was not excited about this one. It was one that I came up with, but it was one that I really wasn't excited about. So I saved it until the very last, hoping secretly that it would not be picked.
So it hasn't actually been in. It hasn't been in the frame.
It hasn't been an option until now. And so I put it in as an option because I had no choice. There weren't enough. And I knew when I put it in that it was going to win. So I was trying to avoid this one, and you'll see why in just a minute. I know everyone thinks that I'm going to, draw the Time Machine or something like that.
Michael J. Fox or Biff. I'm going to have to tell Back to the
Professor,
Future.
or not the Professor. What's his name?
It was Marty. Yeah, that's right.
No. Marty was
Michael J. Fox's character. That's right. What was Doc and Marty? Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the movie.
Doc and Marty remind me of Rick and Morty.
Yeah, who?
It's that cartoon. It's a cartoon.
Yeah.
So You have to check it out.
Informed.
You've got some cartoons to watch.
Anyway, so what does this prompt mean? Well, it means that I need to draw a self-portrait from the future.
How are you going to get into the future?
And are we going to be able to have to draw a portrait of myself looking a lot older than I am now?
All right.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll be doing next week, and I'll be using a combination of black and I see the comment out of the corner of my eye. Jan says, Matt, when you said everybody picked the number one option, we picked the last instead. Yeah, that is hilarious. That's exactly what happened. I knew that everyone would pick Back to the Future because everyone loves Back to the Future.
Sure.
But, anyway.
Dale mentioned the hoverboard.
I know that I'm going to be using a black and white media. I don't know if that's going to be charcoal or graphite and charcoal, or maybe a matte pencil and charcoal, or a carbon pencil and white charcoal. Of course, I will let you guys know ahead of next week's lesson, but it is going to be a black and white drawing, and it's going to be on toned paper, either gray or blue, because I'm so sad that I have to do this. But that's what I'll be doing. Everyone, if you draw along, you'll be drawing a portrait of me. So anyway, portrait in 45 minutes. Yeah, I know. And not just a portrait in 45 minutes, a self-portrait.
I know.
And it's going to be me in the future.
Should we come in like 30 minutes early and extend this to an hour and 15 minutes? Do you need more time?
I'm going to try to do it.
We're going to do it in 45 minutes.
Last season, I think it was 2 seasons ago.
You did facial features.
Yeah, I did a facial features.
And then you did a portrait
and then
after
I did
that.
a portrait.
That's right.
And I got the portrait done in 45 minutes.
Yeah. And that was on gray paper, working with a black and a white media also.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So I feel like I can possibly do it. So
he's just going to draw a picture of his dad. I'm going to tell you.
No, because I look somewhat like my dad, but not,
you do.
Not a whole lot. He doesn't have a beard. He doesn't have
right.
hair.
That's true.
He doesn't even have dark hair.
No.
So anyway. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed watching that image develop on Scratchboard. And for some of you, I'm sure that's a brand new introduction to Scratchboard. And if you like what you saw, then you probably enjoy the medium as well. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll continue on with this season 10 of Getting Sketchy. I will be doing my last drawing this season. And at the beginning of next week, I'll have that voting on the community tab there, so you can vote for what Ashley will be doing the last week. You can vote on that prompt. So be looking for that on the YouTube channel, of course. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe so that you are notified. And of course, you get those little opportunities to vote that pop up too. I think if you're on a mobile device and you're a subscriber, it shows you that voting poll. And also shows you the references. I think that pops up on there. Anyway,
that's handy.
I'm not totally sure. Anyway, thanks again for joining us tonight. Good night, everybody.